2 years, 8 months, and 4 days ago, I was at rock bottom. I was living in Japan and I had roughly $50 to my name. I had no way to make any more money, no way to even get home. And it was all my fault. Have you ever had an idea that you just couldn't let go of? A possibility you couldn't stop thinking about? A dream that wouldn't go away? For me, that dream was Japan. And like I said, it kind of blew up in my face. But weirdly, it also ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. Let me explain. So 4 years ago, I'm a freshman in college, and I kind of have two paths laid before me. On one hand, I could do what everybody else does. I could stay in school, get a degree, do kind of the normal thing. Or on the other hand, I could follow my dream that did not have a very clear path forward. It had a vision, but not much of a path, that had a lot of risks. The thing was, I kind of felt that the longer I stayed in America, the more that dream would kind of fade and become less of a reality. So I made either the bravest decision of my life or the stupidest one. I dropped out. So first was the problem of how I would actually get there. Japan, like most developed nations, is not just super easy to up and move to. Their visa laws are pretty strict, and from the limited information at my disposal, I knew any option open to me was pretty expensive. The only real option I had was to go to school in Japan and then hopefully work towards a work visa at some point. Thanks to my zero savings, I had to work like crazy to both pay off the small student loans I had already taken out and then save for Japan. But luckily, after a lot of hard work and even a few miracles, I had just enough in my bank account to both pay for school, get out there, and get set up. So 9 months after I dropped out of school, I flew to Japan. After so much work, I made it. Problem was, that was kind of when reality set in. Ironically, the biggest city in the world kind of made me feel pretty lonely. Things improved a little bit after school started and I made some friends, but it was an interesting feeling. Not to mention, I still had the problem of my funds drying up a lot faster than I thought they would. But one day, a connection I had made at school, actually, reached out and had a business idea that I could be a part of. He offered a modest upfront payment alongside a portion of the company in exchange for video work. And obviously that was right up my alley, and I jumped on it really fast. That opportunity allowed me to support myself and even travel a little bit, which was really great. That being said, the payment was pretty small and the workload was pretty tough. Most days consisted of school in the mornings and then video editing for the rest of the day in my apartment, my very small apartment, with my only time outside kind of just being the commute in between the two.
There's gale force winds. I literally, oh my God.
On my meager budget, I was only really able to afford tofu, cabbage, rice, and bean sprouts to consist on, which is to say I was definitely losing weight. The Japanese actually have a word for this. It's called moyashi seikatsu. So I'm glad to have participated in an authentic Japanese cultural experience, I guess. This lifestyle continued for months, and while like I said, it did allow me to stay in Japan, it was not necessarily the easiest way to live. But then came the fall, and another semester's tuition with it. So with the very last funds I had, I paid my tuition and I prayed that I could figure out a way to move forward. The business that I was a part of was having some success, but it had not turned a profit yet. So obviously there was no money coming in that way. Yet I also had no time to do any other kind of work. And that's kind of when I hit rock bottom. My bank account balance dipped below $100 and I had no options. After weeks of denial, I decided it was time to give up. I contacted the school and asked for a refund of my tuition, which turned out would take months to process, which meant I also had no way home. With no other savings accounts or credit cards to speak of, I was out of options. The only thing I could have done was sell my camera, which I don't think would have even covered a return ticket. Luckily, and I do really know how lucky I am to have this, my very kind parents swooped in and paid for a return ticket. So just 6 months after I arrived, I said goodbye to Japan and I flew home. That flight from Tokyo to Atlanta was my low point. It was 12 hours to consider the fact that I had failed at a dream I'd held for so long, and now I was destitute with no real prospects for the future. I felt like I had more or less failed the test of adulthood, and now I was paying for it. But then I arrived in Atlanta, and things started to take on a different light. It's a funny thing, but I remember there was a guy at a public piano, he was playing bluegrass and he was singing, and I just sat and I listened for a while, and it made me remember that I loved my home. I looked back on my Japan trip, on the friends that I had made, the experiences I had had, and the things I had learned, and it was worth it, even though it was, different from how I expected it was going to be. In spite of my own failures and mistakes, it had been a transformative experience. And then there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Right before leaving Japan, I applied to a job in the marketing department of SVU as a creative producer. I initially got a response, but then never heard anything back from the hiring manager. I assumed because of my lack of college degree. But a couple of months after I got home, they emailed me and said that they really liked my portfolio and they wanted me to come in for an interview. So I did that interview, and a few weeks later, I had the job at a starting salary 5 times what my pay in Japan had been. And the crazy part is, most of that portfolio that they liked, I had made while I was in Japan. So in the end, not only was my time in Japan worth it, things actually did work out. And that's not to say I wouldn't have done things differently, but I'm so glad that I had the courage, or maybe just the hubris, to drop out of college so long ago. A common theme in scripture is the idea that God will lead people through the wilderness, whether literal or figurative, to their promised lands. And I think that's actually a great metaphor for our lives. Risks are not easy, and they don't always turn out how you expect them to. They are worth it. If you want to go on another wild ride with me, watch my video about why I flew 2,000 miles for a first date. It was another wild experience, and if you like this video, I'm sure you'll like that one. See you guys next time.